have done it.
20's down, and H2K will not go down without a fight. Step 4-on-1, they're focusing down the Nexus. Reckless does not have the tools to success. They're onto a Nexus turret. The crowd is opening.
The Nexus turrets are going down. And Fnatic, as they take down this
Plays from OG, keep on coming.
it's set, and he's just running.
I cannot believe it. And now Origen are just going to fall.
Meta doesn't have to be 30 minutes of farming. G2 are showing aggressive, high-tempo League of Legends.
Trick is naked. Trick is a god.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to opening day of the 2016 European LCS Summer Split. A lot has changed here in Berlin, Germany, where we have our brand new LCS studio. But the ultimate goal remains the same as we continue down the road to Worlds, and you get a sneak there where H2K and Rocket will be playing their first game. Our fans are present as well, cosplayers with Dragon Fist, Lee Sin, and the rest very excited. A beautiful day here in Berlin, and as we see H2K with Freeze warming up for their first game, as well as our current Spring Split champions, G2, with their new bottom lane, of course, as well as Origen getting ready on stage, where we see their bottom lane with Forgiven and Hybrid. Hello, everyone. I'm Evie Schok supporter, excited to be back for another 9 weeks of heated competition here in Europe, where I'm joined by Mitch Kreppel-Voorspels and Andy Vedius Day, and of course, a new member of the LCS crew here. Vedius, you've done Challenger, but what does it feel like to be on the LCS Summer Split start?
It's a little bit nerve-wracking, but I'm really excited to see what these LCS teams bring out on this pretty amazing patch.
Yeah, aren't we all? Now, with a new split comes a lot of changes to the European LCS. First off, while all 10 of our teams from the Spring Split have returned, the lineup of Elements has been acquired by the Bundesliga organization of FC Schalke 04. Now, the league itself has a new format, with the round robin now being made entirely out of best-of-2 matches. The teams will earn 3 points in the standings for a 2-0 win, while a draw will net each squad 1 point.
Yeah, and there's also additional changes. We've changed how we honor individual performances. So back in Spring Split, we had the MVP system. We're switching right now, and also the OP5. We're switching right now to a player of the game system. So each match a player plays, they play 2 matches per series. So each match a player plays, one of the 10 players in that game gets awarded the player of the game. They tally up the points, then we can track as well who's doing the best out of all teams. And at the end of the season, it plays a part in the global season MVP selection. Multiple other sources will also weigh in their vote, and we tally that all together, and then we get to the eventual MVP. But the TLDR is every game we get a player of the game.
TLDR 10 a day and 20 weekend, I will be able to look at the leaderboards, who is doing really well throughout the split. And to cover all of the competition across our 10 games that will be played out every day, we'll be beaming out to the far corners of the globe on 2 streams simultaneously. Each will cover the action in the LCS Arena on stream EU LCS 1 and the LCS Studio on EU LCS 2, respectively.
Yeah, and the summer 2016 season will begin today with the match of the week, G2 versus Origen. That will be on stream 1 here in the arena. Then obviously we'll have H2K playing against Rocket in the studio. That will be stream EU LCS 2. Schalke will play versus Unicorn again in the Series 2 on stream 1. And then Spice will play against Vitality later on stream 2.
Yep, we'll see how that all pans out. At the end of the day, though, Fnatic and Giants will be hosted on both streams, and that will be followed by the post-game lobby, which is our show where we wrap up everything that's happened in the day so far. And hopefully we see some excitement today. One of the things that's different, not in the format, but on the Rift, is patch 6.10. We haven't seen the LCS teams on that. Obviously, we had the big Mage update in 6.9. We've seen some other regions play it as well. And you've got some experience from Challenger, Vedius. What do you think we're going to see here in the LCS?
Yeah, there's still quite a lot of priority on Maokai and Lucian. Right now, they are being heavily picked in the LPL, being heavily picked in the LCK, and we saw them throughout the Challenger series as well. Interestingly, though, they haven't had that much success in terms of winning. So we've seen a lot of interesting counterplay, and it's nice to see this adaptation with the teams. Personally, what I'm most excited for is in the bottom lane, because now we're seeing much more engaged AD carries in the form of Sivir, Ashe, and Kalista, and I think this addition from the bottom lane is going to make things really interesting moving forward.
Yeah, and also be a good time to see if that kind of range support meta that came to fruition in MSI was just an MSI thing, or whether it's an international trend. We're already seeing the likes of Nami over in LPL2, or just very highly rated Bard players overall. So the shift from melee support into range support is something we'll track. And also with the major update, while Ryze and Azir are still tier 1, we could actually see the likes of Vladimir come out in the mid lane, maybe Swain in the top lane. So we'll actually see some new champions here in the summer split.
Let's hope so. Let's hope we see a lot of diversity. Also, a lot of diversity over in the roster and the roster changes. More specifically, 18 roster changes. That is 2 more than in 2015.
Going up.
Mid-split, going up, yay! But it has a different dynamic this time around, Vedius, because it's not like a lot of people moved over to NA. We just gotten an influx of a lot of new players.
We certainly have. There are a lot of new players coming into the LCS, and we've got a lot of new Koreans joining us. Personally, I'm quite excited to see Parang from Roccat. I think he's going to be a valuable addition. And I know Deficio is super excited to see Mighty Bear on Vitality.
Yeah, Deficio definitely Mighty Bear fanboy, although we need to see how he performs. But I think it's great because we got rid of some of the older names that weren't doing that well in some of these teams, and at least we get an influx of potential new talent. They may not perform better, but at least we're looking at new candidates to shine in their respective roles. And it's not like we lost a grand amount of talent over to, for example, North America, what we've used to see. So for overall, the European split should be stronger right now.
Yeah, actually, people coming back to Europe, yay for that. And as these new lineups get put to the test, we want to get your take. Hop on Twitter and tell us, who do you think won or lost the off-season and why? A lot of changes. Vedius, what do you think?
Personally, I'm really excited to see Yellowstar back on Fnatic. I think that they did struggle last split. They didn't have a great regular season, and I think with Yellowstar being that leader once again, I think he's going to be a valuable addition once more for Fnatic.
Yeah, and spoiler, almost half the tweets will be Sven and Mifty to Esports because they picked up the best bot lane in the West. They come as a unit, and a lot of these bot lanes over in Europe have changed, or at least maybe gotten some members back. Look at Fnatic with Yellowstar again. A lot of these teams just have to work on their bot lane dynamics, while G2 just imported the best bot lane in the West, so that should be definitely a candidate for winning the offseason.
Yeah, we'll see what happens, but we also want to know what you think, so remember to send your responses at LOL Esports with the hashtag EULCS so we can see what you think and talk about that later on. For now, though, let's hone in on our first series of the day, a quick preview of the Spring Split finalists and a champion G2 up versus Origen. Obviously, when we take a look at the lineups, you touched on it already, a change, most notably in that bottom lane, and that could be a huge influence for these teams.
I mean, that's the first thing we have to start talking about. Sven and Miffy on G2, hybrid. G2's former support is now on Origen, and then suddenly Forgiven is there. All of a sudden, he's no longer on H2K. So a wealth of talent in these bot lanes. The synergy advantage definitely on the side of G2 Esports.
I know a lot of teams, or a lot of fans in particular, were worried about Origen, but I can safely say that a lot of teams still respect Origen as being a top contender moving forward for the ULCS. But right now, I feel in a lot of eyes are the heavy favorites. I already said importing the strongest bottom lane in the West. I think they are a terrifying team moving forward.
Yeah, we'll see what happens there with Mithy, obviously. We heard some things about his wrist, this and there, but they are playing, so we'll see what happens. Now, turning to the matchup taking place in the new LCS studio on Stream 2, it will be H2K versus Roccat. As we see, there are also changes across the board, and let's start with H2K, because overall, the end of the split was disappointing for them after how good strategically they had performed throughout the split, and they've imported Freeze. That is another European coming back to the European homeland, and a great addition for the team.
Yes, we do have the return of Freeze from Renegades. Really excited to see him playing, because while he was on Renegades, a team that was sitting at the bottom of the NALCS, he performed phenomenally. He had one of the lowest deaths out of all AD carries. He was second in CS differential at 10, only behind Doublelift. And in terms of the amount of damage that he was contributing, in terms of what they could do, again, he was second, only behind Doublelift.
Yeah, really good stats there, and overall just a consistent player, really strong in the laning phase, couldn't really shine that much out of it, also because Renegades had a lot of issues, with multiple roster swaps. What I like about Freeze, also from having played a couple of games with him, is that he's seemingly always happy, a great communicator. So even if you can argue Forgiven versus Freeze, where does it end in the skill department? I think what Freeze offers for the rest of the team will be fantastic for H2K. He should make everybody else better, therefore a better team environment, and that could be the thing that was separating H2K from actually being in that top 2 at the end of playoffs.
A similar thing could be said for Roccat. Obviously, they have Farang and Raze in there, but also Steelback, who has always been solid AD carry, had a great split on the Unicorns of Love, but they finally have their hands on an AD carry that could definitely hold his own, hopefully for a good amount of time, and it could propel the team.
I think when Steelback joined in the spring split after his brief stint in North America, a lot of people underestimated him. A lot of people put Unicorns of Love lower down. They came in and he overperformed. He was super impressive down the bottom lane. He had a very incredible KDA across the board. And while he had a bit of a reputation as the cleanup AD carry, he definitely had his fair share of plays.
Yeah, he's just shown a lot of growth here, and we have to commend him for that. Hopefully he can keep growing as a player now in a lineup with a little more variables, but they seem excited and they seem confident. Talked to them in the room earlier. 2-0 is their prediction.
Yeah, let's see if that happens. Well, we're going to find out right now. The teams are ready for their first clashes of the summer of 2016. So let's send it over to our casters and hit the rift.
Thank you very much, Shocks. I'm Devin, Pyrotechnics Young, everybody, and I'm excited, dead excited, to be right here alongside Martin Officio. We are very excited
I like
to start the play. In the LCS arena, it's the same one you know and love, but we've christened it officially. We've got the match of the week coming up, though, G2 OG, and it's about as hype as it can be.
Such a huge match, of course, also when you consider what happened in your off-season here.
Yeah, a
Bot
little
lane
bit of
switching
back and
over,
forth.
Hybrid joining Origen, Forgiven joining Origen. Big fights down the bottom lane.
Yeah, well, let's not waste any time. Let's break right into it. As the teams are making their final adjustments on the stage, we are going to go ahead and check out those lineups on the blue side for OG. It is, of course, going to be Soaz in the top lane, Amazing prowling the jungle, Power of Evil in the mid lane, but now that bot lane is Forgiven and Hybrid alongside their coach, Nico the Pico.
Yeah, it's almost weird to say Forgiven and Hybrid for Origen down in the bottom lane, but
A bit different.
you can then argue, did Origen lose the off-season? In a way, yes, when you lose the best bot lane in the West, but they also lost, of course, the spring finals, 2G2, 3-1. Now we look at this situation with the changes again. I think Origen will still have a strong team, but I think it will be a very different team right now, and I don't think they can rely purely on Forgiven and Hybrid like they could always rely on Sven and Mythi when things weren't going 100% the way Origen wanted it to go.
Yeah, that's always the question. Is this duo going to slot right in? Hybrid, good individual player. How well will he mesh with Forgiven? Forgiven, how will he affect the team? Obviously, this is the best individual talent they could definitely grab in short notice. But against their opponents, it's going to be a really tough call. We got to turn to the red side for game number 1, the European Spring Champions. That's G2 Esports, and they've revamped their roster as well. Kikis in the top lane, Trick in the jungle, Perks in the mid, and their new bot lane, Sven and Mythi. It's two faces that Origen will recognize well, along with Youngbuck, the coach.
Yeah, and of course G2, we talked so much about it, disappointed that MSI didn't show up at all. Made some changes, and this is something that really stands out because they actually won the split. And then they said, you know what, guys, we can do even better. And when you have the chance to sign Sven and Mythi, the two best players we have in the bottom lane, you go for it. And it shows G2 really want to make sure they are ready for a potential Worlds tournament. And they don't want to go in and pull another MSI.
Yeah, it definitely speaks volumes about their ambitions when they win the split, even after the MSI performance, and they say, hey, we want to make sure that we're going to be the strongest team we can be, so we're swapping players even after we win in Europe. They're not content with domestic performance. Anything but first place would be a disappointment.
I agree. I mean, if you look at this, you can argue, honestly, for 4 out of 5 players on this team to be the best in their role in Europe. Again, Trick, MVP in the jungle. We have Rookie of the Split Perks, who had such a great performance. And then, of course, the new bot lane, Sven and Mythi down here. Kikis is the only guy
track record.
where, Kikis is the only guy where you can say, okay, maybe he's not the best in his role, but Kikis actually fits this team extremely well because he's not a top laner who demands a lot of attention. He's very good with teleports as well, so he's like a team player. And when you have so many star players and so many carries, you need a team player who can always just focus more on the rest of the team than himself. So I actually think Kikis is a great fit. Also, we have to remind the viewers there is a sub for G2, which is Expect, who is a Korean top laner they've brought in, who is in the house with them. Obviously, he's not playing right now.
No, I mean, it's there. Make of it what you will, but he can definitely light a fire under from behind Kikis. And, you can see he's done his best to maybe level up a little bit. He's at Super Saiyan 1 at least. So, maybe that's exactly what G2 needs. And for the rest of this squad, there is nothing but high expectations for these guys. You have to think, with the changes that they have made, with everything that happened after MSI, they are going to come in and they are not going to hold anything back to start off the split.
Yeah, and some people were talking about maybe synergy issues. Well, the thing is, you bring over an entire bot lane together.
That wanted to be together, most importantly.
It's not like the Forgiven Hybrid situation where they're, I'm going to say, forced now to play together. Obviously, they said,
they
we
got
want
grabbed
to,
from different places.
we want
and
to
then
join
just
Origin.
Bash together.
And now they have to build up synergy for Given and Hybrid. We don't know how well they're going to play together. We know how well the G2 bot lane is going to play. And still, if you look at Origin's off-season, after losing the 2 players, I think they made the best of it. When you consider the fact they had obviously not a lot of time, they had to look at the best free agent options. Forgiven was one, Hybrid was the other one. And they have a super strong lineup on paper, but it's just about the teamwork for Origin. It's how the organization is going to help this team improve, and how fast can they reach a proper level where we can say, okay, this team is once again one of the absolute best.
But that is the big question mark for a team like Origen. How well is the organization going to help them shine? This has always been a team that's had a lot of talent. This has always been a team that's had a lot of potential. But last split's start, for instance, really threw a lot of that into question. Yes, they picked it up. Yes, they made the finals. But they still couldn't quite topple over. And after a Worlds performance, that's a big disappointment.
Yeah, and one of the things looking back at the last split, sure, they ended up being second place, and that's great. I would have loved to see how well Origen would have done in that final if they didn't start at 0, basically, in terms of their level coming into the spring split, because they obviously weren't ready. They admitted, they talked about it, said we need to fix it. If they'd been able to start at a much higher level and then improve from there, I wonder how good they could have become. Right now, we can't really look too much at the past. We just have to say, you know what? New season or new split for Origen. They want to show they're good enough to make Worlds, to have a lot of points because they got second place. So it is very likely that if they make it into a top 4 situation, they will then be one of the teams who can go to Worlds.
Right, they definitely got a bit of padding for themselves, but they don't want to take that for granted. Speaking of not quite ready yet, we are resolving a quick audio issue on stage, so please bear with us for just
I thought I was
moments.
just allowed to keep talking.
Well, if you really want, you can
game.
go ahead, Deficio. Just keep on telling me. Tell me all about these 2 teams, please. I'm going to sit back for a minute.
Wow, it's a big one.
We've got a lot.
Everything.
A lot of things. Tell you what, give me a TLDR of how you think, based on not just the bot lane changes, because we've hit those at length, at nauseum, how you think the changes are going to affect the rest of the team in terms of mentality. What do you think the mid, top, and jungle really will change their playstyle, if anything?
Oh, so if we look at G2 first, Emperor wasn't an AD carry who actually required a lot of attention, or he didn't get a lot of resources. He was just kind of part of the team. The carries were always like Perks, and you looked at Trick in the jungle. They were like the star players, and then Hybrid made a lot of plays as a support. Emperor was just kind of there. Sven is a very different case. Like, he's a guy coming in who's used to being the main carry, used to get a lot of resources. So obviously that's something G2 has to figure out. How do you make sure Perks and Sven and Trick are all 3 set up to be able to play their style? That's going to be like the biggest question for G2. I think, though, that Sven has shown he's versatile enough as an AD carry. He can kind of just slot in and fit with G2. And you just have this insane individual talent. And also you have a shot caller and Mythy who can kind of control everyone.
Yeah, and for OG, it seems to be a little bit easier for them to make that swap, despite the fact that it's not as necessarily a clear upgrade, because you already had an AD carry that was very resource intensive, very kill participation intensive. Forgiven fits a very similar mold.
Yeah, in many ways, Forgiven will be able to jump straight in and just fill the role that was now left behind by Sven. Because again, you said it. You get the resources. You play strong lanes. You become the big carry in team fights. But I think for Origen, the question is more about, overall shot calling. Because we know Mythy had such a big voice. Him and Amazing were kind of 2 guys guiding everything, and then Source will also add in a lot, especially when it came to team fights later. I wonder if we're going to see a situation where it's mainly Amazing and Source, the 2 old guys, kind of running the show. Power Evil still trying to find his way and focus more on his own performance. We could also just see an Origen lineup saying, we have strong individual players as well. Like, we can try and play for early game. Get Forgiven and Hybrid in a 2v2 lane with like a Caitlyn pick and a Bard support. See if they can bully that 2v2. Use that to snowball. So suddenly the shot calling doesn't become that difficult. Because once you start winning the early game, it's kind of easy to say, okay, guys, we're winning all 3 lanes. Where do we want to go? Well, we can kind of go everywhere because we are winning and we have the control. I could see Origen try and aim for that. But they've always been a team who likes team fighting, especially also Power Weaver in the mid lane.
That's very true. But doesn't it say a little bit something about your team's communication and coordination if you have to rely on, let's win the lanes, let's snowball from there? I mean, that's the simplistic strategy, but you can't always guarantee it's going to happen.
Yeah, sure. I'm not saying that will be the case for Origen, but like coming into week 1, I wouldn't be surprised to see them say, we want to try and win this game against G2 early on. Also because we know G2 is a team who like to play very aggressive, very high tempo. If they start falling behind, they tend to make mistakes. Something Mythy, I'm sure, would love to try and fix with the team. Maybe in scrims, it's something they've been working a lot on. But I feel like that's where maybe if Origen can put Forgiven in a position with a better lane matchup, he can get the better of the G2 bot lane, and suddenly you have an advantage there for Origen. There are a lot of ways this game can be played out. Lane top as well have changed a little bit in the current meta.
It's so interesting too when you look at how G2 did change with regards to where their weaknesses were. You would see them making those mistakes. Sometimes it was individual players. We saw Trick, going deep in that one game against Origen in the finals, and just kind of getting caught himself out. But that was a rare type of thing. We saw more often they would try to force an engage, collectively go too far, and then start to get pushed back. And oftentimes it was Emperor who paid the price.
Sure.
Ben is a different AD carry. He has more solid positioning, and I really want to see how vocal he will be with this team.
And I think actually the point you were talking about just before there about how sometimes they were a little bit too over-aggressive, and Emperor would from time to time pay the price. It just fit the G2 style, or it was the G2 style, where it's not about just waiting for the enemy team to make a mistake and then punish them. It's actually forcing mistakes from the enemy team. So if you play extremely fast, if you keep putting pressure multiple places on the map, there's a much higher chance the other team will then make a mistake, put their resources in the wrong location, or maybe not expect you to come and dive them or gank them, and then suddenly you can punish them. That's what G2 did so well, and that's why they were different from a lot of European teams who would play it very safe and trying so if you get a tower, then I get a tower, and then we just keep kind of trading, and no one really fights. G2 said, no, we're not going to do that.
Yeah.
We stopped this tower pushing thing. We're just going to go straight up here and set a fight up.
Loved it, too. It was such a great thing to watch, and no one else was really doing it all that much.
And
Origen was close enough to get in the fights, but you're right. They won the split as a result of just having a superior style, being able to execute it better. Just a quick update for all of you guys still waiting around for this one to kick off. I know the tension is mounting. Can feel it from here. We are fixing the audio issue on stage. Should be ready to go fairly soon. But for Origen, just in general, because they're up against the people that they just lost to in the spring, because they're up against their former bot lane. How much does that really tweak your mental attitude coming into the game, being the first match you play?
I think you just really want to win, especially
more than usual, Deficio.
Yeah, I mean, Amazing was very vocal about this change and how he felt like it wasn't okay. So I'm sure he's coming in here being so ready to show.
Constantly ganking the bot lane.
I mean, I think he just really wants to show that Origen are still a super strong team, and it was basically a mistake for Sven and Mithi to leave Amazing Source, Power Wheel, and Peke behind. But again, we're just kind of looking at what we have seen on social media. We don't have Amazing right here saying, I really want to win this game. Of course he wants to. But I think that there's a little bit of revenge maybe in there for some of the players.
Well, I mean, it's the first chance for them to get right back at it. Plus, we got 2 whole games to make it happen. With the introduction of best of 2s now here in Europe, we'll get to see how teams do make that adaptation, how they make that change. And maybe it weighs off a little bit on your mind when you think, not that we can lose, that we can't afford. That's not really the right mentality, but that even if we do not take a win away, we can always learn something more from it. There's always more footage. There's always an ability to adapt. And maybe that lightens the attitude just a little bit to start things off.
I mean, the big thing about moving away from the best out of 1 is the fact we get way more games on stage. And you can practice as much as you want in scrims. It will always be slightly different when you sit on stage and you play. So the more stage experience you get for all your players, the better it is for your teams, for your region.
Right.
So obviously it's great that all these teams here will get to play more games. Also, you are in a situation where if you do make a mistake, in, let's say, the pick and ban phase in the first game, you can change that. You can adapt for the next game, and you get a fair chance one more time to see if you can win one game. Obviously, if you play 1-1, you get 1 point, so you get something. Big one is the 2-0, 3 points for yourself.
Yeah.
And then we're going to see, like, during this season, how teams might start really poorly, but then suddenly they just fire away, get like 12 points over 2 weeks because they win all the series they play. And suddenly they just fire up the rankings. I mean, that will happen.
Yeah, well, it'll definitely be a little bit more crazy and a little bit more volatile, you'd imagine. Last split really followed a lot of trends right up until the end. The playoffs really did shine a different light on it. When you did start to get into series, you started to see results differing, teams not adapting, teams not understanding the meta, and relying maybe too much on perhaps scrim results or just generally what they thought in their own bubble, what was strong. With more games on stage, you get to test that twice as often, and you start to refine those strategies. It's really exciting to see not only how they do domestically, but internationally as well going forward because of it.
Yeah, and I want to see how many teams will come into a best out of 2, because you play on both sides with like a strategy for, let's say, blue side first, and then a specific strategy for red side for the next game, or if they will just kind of adapt to what happened in the first game. Obviously, there will always be some changes in terms of the pick and ban phase, but there are specific picks, especially in the mid lane, that you can go for on red side you won't normally do on blue side. We're talking picks like Kassadin, obviously these counter picks you don't really want to blind pick. It opens up for new picks, obviously, for some of these mid laners.
Perks does do some of those crazy blind picks.
Sure.
I don't know if he's changed that recently.
I mean, Power Vivo in the past also played things like Kassadin. He pulled out a Talon.
He did play his signature Syndra once last split.
We've seen the Syndra, which is something I wouldn't blind pick
the
either.
Cassiopeia's come out.
Yeah.
I mean, if there are a pair of mid laners that are going to be
uh,
going for something a little crazy, these might be it.
It's tough for poor old Cassiopeia.
Yeah,
I
right
really
now
feel like the
it's-
mage rework hit her very hard in the negative way.
But you can't hit the boots anymore, man.
It's because of the boots.
Yeah, that's the whole
No
reason.
boots. No
Now,
cast.
but moving away from that, though, too, let's talk about another mid laner that may come up in these best of twos. Because we have the option for people to swap between, there's always the Peke factor. And that's something that Origen have in their back pocket that no other team has really made use of in the European LCS. And I want to see if that starts becoming a mainstay and they get power a little bit more, backstage, just kind of like listening and watching, like they were talking about towards the end of last split, or did they leave him as the main man unless they really feel they need Peke?
I mean, clearly, again, Origen is showing they want Power Evil to be the starter. They want him to be able to grow as a mid laner and kind of learn from Peke. But if you look at this new setup from Origen, I actually feel like Peke would have a lot of value playing because we know he's a more vocal member. He's very smart, tons of experience, and the players really respect and listen to him a lot. So when you have this team with these new members and you're going to try and figure out some proper shot calling for it, that's where Peke can really shine. But clearly they're saying Power Vivo mechanically is the better player, and he's the guy we want to start with because he is playing game one.
He's a young guy. They want to train him up as well continuously. But yes, starting him on the roster, I mean, it says this is the guy, this is our main starter. This is the same story they have stuck to since they picked him up. Now, that being said, we do know that the team has stated, at least in the past, that they play markedly different, at least to begin with, under Peke. And when we talk about these shot calling and communication question marks, that is always a fallback point for them. I'm curious to see if they decide to use it.
Yeah, it's something like if they lose game one, let's say they get stomped in game one, you can suddenly see, okay, we need to have a reaction here, put in Peke for next game. But it could also just be a playoff thing they will have, where it's BO5s, more games to switch between. I think one of the big things last split wasn't just the shot calling or the difference in player mindset when Peke was playing. It was also just champion pool-wise, Power Vivo had focused on certain picks, and Peke were playing other picks. So they were like, okay, if you want to play Lulu compositions, especially towards playoffs, we put in Peke. If you want to play like Azir, Victor, these big control mages, we put in Power of Evil. So coming into this, the current meta for mid laners are like Ryze, Azir, Victor, these kind of picks, and that's what Power Evil is playing. Especially a lot of Azir, if you look at playoffs, last split it was banned in almost every game except for one.
Well, and we expect it to be continually banned again. As the Azir and the Ryze have pretty much been hit almost constantly, and we're starting to see the Victor. We saw the Lissandra a lot in CS qualifiers. So it's a lot of these powerful control mages, but there's always the assassin possibility. We might see the LeBlanc pop up. Who knows?
Yeah, LeBlanc is a good pick. Zed potentially if you're on red side again.
Oh yeah, Perks will be pretty happy about that one.
Perks could definitely pull out a Zed if he wants to, but there's always a risk when you play Zed. Still, even his late game, it's not great, even though QSS obviously helped him. Their QSS nerfs. Compared to like a Victor and Azir, you do nothing in the late game. Like they will literally win you at a team fight. Zed will never win you at a team fight.
It's assumption that they're going to go ahead and win all out really early on. But while we get this audio issue sorted out, we're going to go ahead and head back to the analyst desk to just talk a little bit more about the pregame.
Thank you very much, guys. Yes, it's us again, unfortunately, still working on the issues. But we do get to Vem for a little bit more, and obviously we have a lot to talk about at the beginning of the summer split. Talking a lot about picks and bans there, but I just want to focus on, they're sitting on stage now. They were so ready to play. We saw them in the makeup room beforehand. They're all very giggly still, but I mean, it's annoying. You were ready.
Yeah, it will affect you. If you have ever played, I mean, if you've ever had a pause where you have expectations and then you're ready to get into game and suddenly a pause happens. I've had it happen to me a couple of times. It throws you off a little bit. The good thing, though, is that they have a bunch of resilient players. Like, nothing will ever tilt Sven and Mythi. I feel Kikis is pretty calm. Perks, he always seems ready to just kind of go for the plays.
Yeah, I mean, when we saw them on stage, the Origen lineup actually looked really happy. They looked really positive in the way that they're interacting with each other. You saw Forgiven in particular, he was laughing a lot with Power of Evil, so they seem to be in good spirits moving forward, and I think they are really excited. And looking at the tension, I think that while both teams There is a bit of tension between them. I think mostly they just want to get into game. They want to start playing, and they want to show that, hey, we've still got what it takes to be at the top of Europe.
Yeah.
Both might think that, but it does seem to me that G2 is like resounding favorite for this. Origen feel like they have to patch a lot of things together because, as Deficio alluded to on the caster desks, G2 is fine because they got an entire bot lane that was also a major shot calling component of Origen back in the day. Also the main driving factor in a lot of their stellar performances, even in Worlds. They've lost that now. So they need to fill that with a bot lane that isn't even a unit. Hybrid and Forgiven have never really played together. Neither have been known within their teams to be the biggest communicators. So right now there's a kind of like figure it all out period for Origen, which usually is fine, but their first match of the week and the season is against G2 Esports.
While that is true, I still think that Origen can be pretty happy about Power of Evil right now, because the mid lane meta has shifted very much towards mages, control mages. So we're seeing the Rise, we're seeing the Victor, we're seeing the Azir. And we have to remember that Power of Evil was famous for his Orianna. And right now, champions like Orianna are extremely powerful. So I think that in terms of a meta situation, Power of Evil could be in a comfort zone.
I mean, we talk about the meta and being for Power of Evil's comfort zone, but when we think back to the team in general, Origen in the spring split, and they admitted this themselves, they needed some time to ramp up and they needed time to gel. So I'm kind of afraid that the same scenario might repeat itself when they now bring in a bottom lane that has to completely reconfigure.
But there is time to gel. Nobody's going to judge them, except some of their maybe hardcore fans, if they somehow lose this series. You know, you're going up against the spring split champion that has gone through improvements with no real hit story communication. You are expected to lose the series. Yeah. Even last split, Origen was expected to lose against G2 Esports, which they eventually did then. So I don't think it's a shame if they drop the series. We just need to see where they're at. How confused are they? Are they playing as a unit and just a worse unit as opposed to G2? Or are they just all across the map not knowing what to do? Because playing with Forgiven in your bot lane requires a certain finesse and just adjustment to his style, unless you can kind of bend him to do what you want. But then you get a Gambit scenario where you have a lot of lackluster Forgiven, in my opinion.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Because obviously what we saw Forgiven in H2K, was that then more to his original or true form? And how do you think it will evolve here?
I mean, we saw Forgiven in some games with H2K, split pushing on the side lane, taking down tier 2 turrets on his own. He could play a slightly more aggressive lane style. Forgiven in his element is the guy that plays Caitlyn Nami, pushes you on the tower, challenges you on every single CS, and makes your life horrible and miserable until you cry for a gank. That's where the meme comes from where Forgiven in Outset it goes like, can we please 2v2? Because he plays this obnoxious pushing style that obviously needs to get punished.
Well, if we look at the meta, you mentioned it beforehand. We see Ashe coming out, we see Sivir coming out. Forgiven and Sivir, of course, that relationship over there. But how do you think that will influence him, and will those picks come out?
Well, I mean, Caitlyn right now is pretty much the next tier. In LCK right now, it's very much about ban Lucian, ban Sivir, pick Caitlyn. Because Sivir is stupidly powerful in team fights. She's really good at setting up engages, and she can work in a number of different compositions. But Caitlyn, after Lucian, is just so oppressive in lane, especially when you put it up with a Bard or an Nami. It becomes very obnoxious to deal with.
Yeah, funny you say that. Over on stream 2, that's exactly what kind of happened. H2K ended up banning out the Lucian themselves, and they picked up an early Caitlyn over there. We hopefully have a graphic highlighting all those picks, so I don't have to mention them one by one. But that's a game going on over stream 2 right now. Lucian was there, banned out. Bard was there, banned out. And that's kind of what's going on in the meta right now. We've seen some shifts. Caitlyn, Ezreal, Lucian, very important as picks overall. You see that in solo queue as well. Every AD carry is tired of playing Lucian, Ezreal, maybe Caitlyn, not much else there.
All right. Well, just as an update, we are still working on some audio issues here on Stream 1 and in the arena for the start of OGG2. That is slightly delayed. Obviously, H2K versus Rocket is already underway there, and some interesting picks. Let's take a look at both these teams. Obviously, we talked a lot about OG and maybe how it will be problematic. G2, obviously, they still have those things that worked perfectly for them, even though maybe a lot of people will judge off the MSI performance. But I feel like with everything that was going on, that was a different team, and I don't think Trick or Perks have lost any of their feathers coming into the summer split.
I mean, talking about the whole MSI thing, it's kind of sad the way it all went down. I don't think if you talk to G2 and they could explain you the rationale behind their decision, I think it would somewhat make sense, the whole vacation thing. I think it was communicated poorly, but going into it, if all you had was challenges to scrim and you really wanted people to take like a mental reset, it's fine. But then they got into MSI. It turns out that CLG, for example, who did practice challenges teams, were much better prepared, had some pocket picks ready. But I think it will be a good lesson for G2. I think their players right now are hungry to prove that they're still the good domestically, which they should be. But then hopefully the lesson will give its fruits of the labor at the end of the split when G2 hopefully go to Worlds and then practice their asses off.
I mean, yeah.
I'm actually quite excited to see Kikis as well, because Ocelot was quite vocal on Twitter about saying if you underestimate this guy, you are going to get punished for it. And now that the meta is shifting ever so slightly more towards off-tanks a little bit more, so while we are seeing a lot of Maokai, we're seeing a bit of Gnar, a bit of Trundle, we even see a bit of Swain up there. Kreppa mentioned it earlier. It will be interesting to see how well Kikis has adapted, because as Deficio was talking about, he is a low econ top laner, and now that you have these somewhat off-tank, they do need a bit more resources.
Yeah, 2 good points. One, I've never seen an owner say, you know what, underestimate this guy. This guy's not that good at the game, so we'll see that.
I
see
did
Shox
get
pointing.
the cue that we almost are going to get back into game. I think we are very, very close. So some final thoughts. Maybe a bit of a... People are we're also happy that we're getting in game. Don't you worry about that.
Nah, I just like looking at myself talking, personally. If this could be the entire show, great. To round out that final point then.
No, I'm gonna cut you off. We are gonna go to the casters because we want to see the game. So take it away, guys.
Thanks very much. Sorry, Kreppa, you'll have to chime in a little bit later. I know you're good at collecting them anyway. So, Deficio, we're about ready to go. We've had a chance to settle it all in.
I got about 15 minutes more of talking ready.
All right, do you want to just time me right now so
we can
go?
just delay the game a little bit more. We are ready. No, we are, in fact, just waiting for the players. It is not waiting for the casters. It's not something we do. Game should be up very, very soon. And then we get into the first pick and ban phase on this stream, because the other stream, of course,
got a little bit of a spoiler on Twitter a moment ago. Yeah, looks like some interesting stuff.
Already in pick and ban, actually already in game. They're past the pick and ban phase. We, however, are going to pick and ban phase.
Right about now, so let's zoom it right on in. First pick and ban over on stream 1, Origen and G2. Let's see what they start things off with here on the blue side. Origen ban the Zed away.
Wow,
that was quick.
So for people who did listen to all our fill for the last 15 minutes, we did talk about Zed, obviously as a purple side pick. Great last pick potential for some of these mid laners in Europe who love to play Assassins. Origen respecting it very clearly, but there's a lot of picks we're looking at in here, like Lucian is the #1 AD carry. Caitlyn comes in as a close second. Obviously, then Kindred, Nidalee, Braum against Hybrid. There's a Lucian ban from G2.
But all mid lane bans from Origen side, and LeBlanc was taken away.
Interesting, because there's still like a Zia, Ryze, Victor,
which
all
have been
these
banned
picks
so heavily in all the 610 we've seen so far.
Yeah,
there's the Ryze.
Okay, so Origen in many ways setting up for like a Zia first pick. In this case, we've seen that multiple times over in the LCK, over in the LPL. But then G2 can still get a Victor pick later on in the rotation and get like a Caitlyn second or first rotation for G2. And that's a good trade as well. Both Kindred and Nidalee are open at this point. Bard being banned, so both teams are looking to just trade junglers. Unless we get a sneaky Rek'Sai potentially coming in, something that's been played a lot as well around the world.
Yeah, we'll have to see if that is in fact what comes in. But with those potentially being traded back and forth, you have to think that as your first pick is a strong possibility.
With 3 mid lane bans, definitely
there's
a
so
strong
much of the pool
possibility.
bled, but as you mentioned, there's still the Victor available. I want to see what Origen's plan is here, trying so heavily on the mid lane ban.
Yeah, that's my problem with all these mid lane bans, is there are still 2 so super strong picks left in both Victor and Azir that most mid laners in the world will be more than fine with taking. Origen is clearly saying, like, it's actually funny here because we have a lot of situations where you just trade. You can trade Nidalee for Kindred if you're G2. You can trade Azir for Victor for either team. So Origen is saying, you know what, we actually value the Nidalee above everything else. So we give you Kindred, and we also give you first pick on either Victor or Azir, if that's what you want to go for. But Caitlyn is also open. We know both these AD carries are very good Caitlyn players, and it's a lot about who can get the strongest 2v2 matchup. Now that we have all this dragon control coming in, you want to control the bottom side of the map. That's where Caitlyn really shines.
Yeah, so the Kindred doesn't necessarily have to be picked up on this rotation. Don't expect it to go over on Origen's side now that the Nidalee has the first pick. There is the Caitlyn. It's also a Echo that comes in very quickly. This one should go to Kikis unless they want to pull some really weird swap rounds. I don't think so, though.
Another trade situation where you have Maokai Echo. You can give Maokai to one team, pick Echo yourself. It just depends on which one you value the highest. I think this Caitlyn pick, I know we talked about it so much already in this champ select. I think it's really, really important for these 2 AD carries facing each other. Bot lane meta right now is a lot about picks more than straight up individual skill, because there's so many of these strong lane bullies you can run.
Not to mention the individual skill is pretty darn high on the AD carry.
It is extremely high as well. for both teams. But we talk about Maokai, you can trade him if you are G2, or we can maybe see something like a Trundle coming in for Source if you want to have a split pushing composition where you want to try and counter the Echo. There are multiple options, and it's fun to see how we are still in a meta where almost every game there's so many top tier picks open. Like, go back to season 5, and a lot of times people would just ban out of the OPs, and then everyone would get second tier picks. Now there's so many tier 1 picks that you can keep just trading, and then have a few target bans.
Yeah, and the Corki comes in on OG's side there, and the Maokai, as expected, is locked for Soaz.
Oh, I am not the biggest Corki fan.
Yeah, that was something we saw quite a lot of way earlier in the split. We also saw it mid lane. Perks was actually one of the ones that did popularize it. I very much doubt to see it mid lane here.
It received a lot of nerfs over the few patches. You know, if you go back a month, even a few weeks back, so not a few weeks, but 2 months back, it got quite a lot of nerfs, and it didn't get played at all at MSI. It was no longer a viable pick. It is an old forgiven one as an AD carry choice. Obviously, level 6, you are very, very strong on Corki. Once you can start trading, probably once you get Trinity Force, we always know the pick. And the power spikes. Kindred coming in, not a surprise.
And the Soraka.
Soraka. We saw SKT played earlier today. Wolf still picking a Soraka, and it is still, even though there's so many nerfs that happen to Soraka and Grievous Wounds and everything, it still has a ton of value. Because the amount of healing you can ditch out in these fights, especially in the big team fights, is insane. And you can't really apply the healing debuff to every single member. It's very hard to then kind of like shoot it around and always keep applying it to everyone. So Soraka ulti still have quite some value.
Yeah, always able to get those heals off very quickly. A lot of sustain for G2's side just because of it. And we'll have to see what Origen want to answer with to round out their bot lane. The Corki, as we mentioned, a little bit unusual, but these two bot lanes, can't wait to see them butt heads against one another. It's going to be really, really crazy. The Varus comes in at the last second here. That should be a Power of Evil special. A lot of poke, actually. Yeah, a little bit. That's a lot of poke, along with the Janna.
As soon as OG saw the Caitlyn, said, okay, we're not going to win the bot lane straight up, so we are going to draft a composition instead, where every single pick has a lot of synergy. So we have poke from 3 members, you have the big frontline tank, and you have the full disengaged Janna, obviously from the support. So this is a 100% poke composition from Origen's side. G2, on the other hand, have a lot more options here. Decent siege with of course, a Caitlyn pick. Can still lock in like a TF. You have range jungler.
I don't know, man.
Also
last time we saw Perks play Twisted Fate.
Sure, it wasn't the greatest for you, but there are other picks.
In the situation, it's good, yes.
There are a lot of picks in the meta who can punish a blind pick Varus.
Yeah.
Fizz can be one of them.
Get the Fizz.
Like, Faker obviously used it a ton at MSI. It is a good pick in the mid lane as full AP Fizz, unless you want to put it top lane, build a tank, and you put the Echo mid. It's actually something we've seen quite a lot, especially over in China, where people like to put Echo in mid against against like a Varus pick, like some of these pokes, because Echo is so mobile. He can always stick to this target and also get to the target, and he can threaten ganks with his W on these low mobility targets.
What do you value more against the Varus pick, though, especially considering Power of Evil? The Echo or the Fizz?
I mean, Fizz will snowball much harder and be a much better split pusher as a full AP Fizz in the late game. So that is what G2 is deciding on as well. Yes, Fizz will lose very early on. He will get pushed into his tower. He will hate his life until he goes back at least once. But then it's all about how much pressure you have around him in lane. Because if you actually have the river control with pink wards, suddenly Fizz knows he's not going to get ganked, and he can start all-inning at level 6. Land that ulti from Fizz, and then suddenly Varus is not going anywhere, and you can actually get onto him. But it requires that river control.
Well, we'll have to find out. Now the lineups are all locked in. It's time to load up for our first marquee matchup of the summer of 2016.
It was an upgrade to get Mithy and Sven on the lineup.
Sven and Mithy are definitely the best bot in the West.
Even though they're good, I think me and Forgiven can step up and be better than them.
They'll soon realize that the grass is always green on the other side.
We have no clue how strong we are yet, and we have no clue how strong they are yet.
I don't know what to expect against G2.
If they can control their aggressiveness, they will be a good bot lane. If not, they will get punished.
It's gonna depend about like how well they match together.
I mean, we need to win.
And we're on the Rift. Don't forget to keep sending your tweets in to think who's going to take this one away. OG win or hashtag G2 win at LOL Esports is the place. Origen marching down the mid, turn their attention actually upriver right now. Whereas G2 were looking to build themselves a line of scrimmage, try to prevent any areas of ingress.
And we are most likely going to see an OG team opting into a lane swap here. When you play Janna, you do not want to play her against sustained supports, especially not against the likes of Soraka. Also, Corki in the early levels versus Caitlyn is not a great matchup for the Corki. Wants that level 6, wants to get closer to the Trinity Force, mainly the Sheen. So Origen will get the deep wards in, try and set this top, but look at G2, they're all staying around. We might get a level 1 fight.
Yeah, Power's going to send a piercing arrow through. Throwing a sapling in a spot kick. Mithy stepping a little farther forward here.
Do not send in the
Definitely
Soraka
have some beef
to
right
face
now.
check. Mithy's like, guys, I'm going.
Minions have spawned.
Okay.
He's going to check again.
Still Origen.
Q over the wall.
Yeah, they're not leaving this. Fighting for every inch of the rift at level 1.
Just making sure you get information on where Origen is going. They haven't been able to recall, so everyone is still on the top side.
Late mid. Mithy's still causing a little bit of problems for OG as they push their way further in to back to their own territory.
See how Sven has just snuck in behind, saying, okay, you guys are all on top side. If you want to play a lane swap, you're going to be delayed going to the bottom side. So we will get a slight advantage here in the early start of the lane swap because you're already here. We saw you on top side. That's why Mythic getting that extra information level 1 when they walked out was important. So they knew, okay, Origen, you're going to have to take a long route to the bottom side to get your lane swap. And Kikis misses the first 2 CS. The crowd saw it instantly. And now he gets
a little
2
bit
of them. Missed another one.
Hybrid holding on for Forgiven to be able to grab that CS back. But yes, let's talk a little bit about this lane swap because it became such a predictable thing towards the end of the last split. We could see how each lane swap would pretty much play out, but it's changed just a little bit now with the prioritization on Dragons and deprioritization of Rift Herald. Talk me through it a little bit more.
Well, first of all, it's going to depend a lot on the teams. How much value do you put on that first dragon? You can see the first one in this game is already spawned here. So how much value do you put on the first dragon? So you can potentially take the bot lane tower and then just recall and return to the bottom lane. And you play the 2v2 and you have control on bottom side. You can play the still standard swap where you take tier 1 towers and you just keep trading tier 1 towers. I don't think we're going to see a lot of games where we get like those 4 towers on each side. So like 8 towers going down before anyone kills each other.
Yeah.
Those kind of plays.
Trades, though, in the ones.
Yeah, I mean, we can technically see it, but a lot of teams value getting that 2v2 lane in around the bottom side to get control for these early dragons and not opt into this full lane swap. One thing you can do though is you can actually use your teleport more offensive lane swaps. So here Source stayed top to try and get some experience to stay in range of it, and then he used the teleport to the bottom side right here. And then one of the reasons for it is we see less of these situations where you set up these massive tower dives in swaps, and more situations where once the first 2 towers are dead, you just opt into the standard lanes, and then you don't really need to teleport to catch anything. You don't need to teleport to set up a crazy play. You just kind of walk straight into your lane. So you can see Source opted in to get a bit of experience, and then TP down to get the tower on bottom side.
Yep. Only a few moments behind what G2 was doing, regardless of the fact that they had that teleport in there a little bit quicker. So everything's still fairly standard, even on the gold game. Get to see those 2v2 swap back around. But as you mentioned, Perk's having a lot of trouble against Power in this very early mid lane. The 2 meeting each other up.
Fizz is one of the weaker mid laners when it comes to level 1 through 4, 5. He wants his level 6. He wants that first back, get a bit more sustain, get a few defensive components in there. Kick is getting ganked right now by Amazing.
Going hunting here.
Whoops.
And he takes the timewinder on the back, so Kikis gets the last laugh in that gank attempt. Nothing doing there. Teams likely not to go for the Drake really early. Obviously, they want that 2v2 like you mentioned. It's also Cloud Drake, which we've seen very little prioritization of on 6.10 so far.
Yeah, it's not even tier 1 boost you get out of combat from the first Cloud Drake, so
Flat movement speed, but not a whole lot, yeah.
No one likes it. Everyone flames it all the time, poor guy. But we see a G2 and Origen both opting in for another trade. Tier 1 tower for tier 1 tower. Obviously, the reason Kikis almost got ganked there is because you want to push out that wave after tower goes down, so you delay how fast the enemy team can move up to the next tower with their dual lane, and also you get that extra experience and farm. Yeah. You see Kikis is level 3 already, but so is Source.
And for Origen's bot lane, that has duo lane, I guess I should call it, because they've been all over the place so far. This should definitely help out Forgiven not being bullied so much in the early game. So this trade seems to benefit them a little bit more. I mean, it's kind of 50-50, but they avoid that laning phase that can be oppressive.
It's what we talked about. Origen were not looking to lane early on against G2's 2v2 lane. Also, Maokai can struggle against the Echo in the first few levels, so it's very smart for Origen to get the swap Amazing is on bottom side here, which is a little bit odd for him to stay around.
I'm gonna draw a little bit of fire, but he's kind of playing with it there. Jumps it over. Still gets hit by the Soraka. Still, they'll just kind of trade turrets as normal.
Yeah, normal situations, you would have seen Amazing on top side. Like, steal away the crooks you see up here in G2's jungle. But try to be a bit annoying on bottom side. Snipe out a few minions, get a bit of experience. Just a little bit out of place, but he did take the camp that Trick was going for, because Trick was actually taking the normal jungle route in the swap. It's the mind game fire. Now he's gonna find it.
Goes hunted, and he's got some help from Power. Trick might be first blooded in this game. He's gotten healed up by Mithy, but will it be enough? No! First blood, and Amazing has got to get out of town. Turns around to give a little bit of help back over to Mithy, but in comes Kikis to get the revenge kill, and Perks manages to answer onto Power. A 2-for-1 trade for G2 Esports.
So Trick got so surprised that Amazing was still on the bottom side, because there was technically nothing for Amazing to do. Realizes the camp is gone, obviously roams through what's normally a free jungle for him, and suddenly Nidalee is there, and then Varus comes down collapsing. Origen gets a kill, but because G2 were on the bottom side with more members, we had, of course, Mithy roaming up, we had Perks roaming down. So look here, Trick is getting surprised, like what is Amazing doing here at this point? The rest of Origen is not even close by, but Mithy, because G2 are on the bottom side, they control the bottom side, can roam up, delay it a little bit, Kikis can join in, Perks can join in, and suddenly now, Origen find themselves in a massive numbers disadvantage, and that's why you normally would never take a fight on the side where the enemy team is much, much stronger and have multiple members when your guys have just recalled, or is a Maokai with no teleport sitting on top side.
Yeah. All that said and done, G2 did not actually finish off the turret in the bottom side, so despite the fact that they have the kill advantage, Origen are actually in a gold lead at the moment, and with Forgiven and Hybrid on this bottom side to push the wave in, they might be able to keep that alive for some time yet. We're only 7:30 into this game, but I mean, it's already been very back and forth, a little unusual.
And again, it just shows the surprise fact, honestly, because Sven had already recalled, because he was obviously so used to your top laner finishing the tower, so he recalled to rush to the top side during that fight. But then Kikis saw there was a chance for him to go in and get a kill, and he didn't manage to finish the tower. So just a few little changes there. Not something we're going to see every game. That's not exactly the lane of meta that your jungler is randomly going to gank the other jungler. But
nothing for granted this game, though, Deficio. It's all, you can't make the assumptions all the time. So
it actually means Origen gets out ahead because they get a tower on top side.
Yep. Oh, given a lot of damage from the built-over Peacemaker. Healed up. Sven is fine. Shield comes in a little bit late for Forgiven. Amazing, though, is trying to bait this one out. He does manage to hit a spear onto Mithy. Meanwhile, Trick up in the top side, clearing away Skull Crabs. Looking for maybe a gank on Power, who's staying relatively safe for hugging his tower, but in comes the Fish, Chains of Corruption, another piercing arrow. Trick is coming in, slowed up. There is a teleport coming down, but will it be too late? Power is going down. Perks picks up the kill credit for that one as Soaz comes in to try and return fire, but Trick is out of there.
And we talked about this in Champ Select. When you blind pick that Varus, some of these picks that can just get onto him very, very easy. Perks gets his ulti, straight onto Power View with no flash. That's an easy kill and very important. Trick as well managed to just get out of tower range before the snare came in from Soaz, so he didn't get locked onto tower. And therefore G2 can now disengage. It's a big, big problem for Origen with this Varus pick in the mid lane. They actually want to get out of this laning phase. They want to have Perks leave Power View alone and just allow Origen to play this pushing game where you land poke and you siege tower. But Perks is obviously never going to stop trying to look for picks. There are 4 extremely squishy members on Origen, and then the Maokai, who you will probably never really want to sit against anyway, because you want to have kill pressure every time. I mean, late game, he's just going to kill the Maokai too, but that's whatever.
Yeah, but at the moment, right now, they've still got these big problems in trying to keep the squishy members alive. Power of Evil just barely didn't have his exhaust back up. Obviously, some more time before the flash was going to come back, but without any summoners, even though he looked like he was playing safe, you cannot underestimate especially a player like Perks. 2-0 kills now on this Fizz. We talked about how hard it snowballs. He's on track to do it.
Yeah, Fizz is one of the weaker early game mid laners, but one of the best late game mid laners we've had since forever, almost in the game. Like, his scaling is insane also because not only does he have insane damage, he also has survivability because of Trickster. Very low cooldown, gets hourglass, can always use it to buy more time. Trick is here, and now Cloud Drake's like, oh, you have friends? No, he's actually killing your ward, now he's going to kill you. So poor Cloud Drake, one more time, no one likes it, but
they see him
OG's going to stop
with the ward that they did put down. So now Trick a little bit low here. It's a 1500 Cloud Drake. It might be worth the fight over.
Remember, Soaz...
Oh! Smarted away by Trick, secures it.
Oh, that was risky. Like, Soaz had no teleport, and Kikis did have TP. So technically, G2 could just set up this dragon and told Origen, if you want to fight, we're going to TP on you before we fight you. Instead, it became a 50-50 smite.
Not something we expected for Cloud Drake either.
To be fair, though, the reason G2 didn't want to invest everything it's because it's Cloud Drake. They actually just want to kill the dragon to get the next dragon to spawn, which is, again, the sad life of the Cloud Drake.
Yep. So first one over to G2, they do get that plus 15 move speed now. We'll talk about that later because the Chains of Corruption are on to Mithy, who has to flash. As Amazing is exhausted, down Trick comes in for some relief, pitching the fishes on. Hybrid getting chomped, and now Perkz gets a killing spree to pick up Amazing, looks for power, return, that's a double kill for the fish. And Kikis, Toronto breaks back to safety, Origen, the rest of them, way too late to the party here. G2, 6 kills on the board.
Yeah, G2 is getting everything right now. Great team fight in the mid lane, Perkz, more kills. It is not often we see a mid lane Fizz being 4-0 at 11 minutes.
You don't watch enough LMS, man. What about Westor?
Westor will lose lane every game.
That's very true.
But then like at 30 minutes, he will have a good team fight and get a few kills.
You're right, we don't see it that often. Let's take a look at this fight again from a top or a higher up view. Mithy just gets completely chunked, flashes away, but then they don't have much left.
But again, this is the whole problem for Origen that we keep talking about. It's a siege composition. You want to land poke, you want to pressure on tower. They opt into a fight against double TP, and you can see how fast G2 is saying, oh, you're engaging, you're overextending in a lane, instant TP, we're just gonna take that fight, more kills for Perkz. Yes, there's now cooldown on the teleport for him, but I'll trade that for 2 more kills.
Definitely any day. So another tower does get taken by G2. Finally finish off the one on the bottom side. They kind of left not fully digested. So gold lead is actually fairly significant here. It's about 2 and some change for G2, 2.5.
And the amount of plays Origen can make now, they're shrinking. It gets harder and harder for them to make a correct move. Because if they ever overextend and don't push out the side lanes first, G2 can just roam in behind them through their jungle and always threaten their flank. And when you play a poke competition, when you play these very squishy champions, flanking is what you want to make sure never happens. Because if they can set up an easy flank, then Janna has 1 disengage with her Monsoon from all angles. But against an Echo with his mobility, against a 5th with Trickster, it's very hard to disengage properly against that flank.
And it's hard for Origen to really find members to pick off. You could see it just a moment ago. Kikis was able to pretty much zone Amazing away completely just with the parallel convergence. Perkz has been nigh impossible to catch thanks to the playful Trickster. And Sven is able to get out of any dangerous situation thanks to the rocket sustain. They just have so much backup. How do OG break into this lineup?
I mean, yeah, that's a tough question because their composition isn't built to be able to come back from such a disadvantage.
Why would you draft that knowing that
I mean,
they're not coming in as necessarily the favorites? Yes, they're a strong team, but G2, the Spring Split champions, picked up their bot lane. It's a tough team to face off against.
It's important to always highlight that no team will always draft a comp and fall behind. So when you draft these poke comps here, if you play out a good lane swap in the start, if you are even coming into the mid game where you get your Trinity Force, where you get your first item on Varus, and you get to push out your side lanes and then group mid, it's extremely effective. But because your mid laner had that early fight, lost his flash, then he gets tower dive, so he's down. Then you go a little bit too ham for 2 kills in mid and you once again die. Well then your composition will obviously look extremely weak because you have now fallen much further behind than you were ever supposed to. So Origen are in a super tough spot now. Technically what they want to try and do is see if they can push out one of the waves with Forgiven and then move into the mid lane so you can sit with Power Weevil and start landing a bit of poke, potentially land an ulti from Power Weevil and create a pick that way like under a tower. The problem is G2 should never allow them to like push out these side lanes. Because you have Echo there who's a strong play push. You have Fizz who's extremely fed and can kill anyone. So basically, Origen is under pressure in every single day.
Yeah, we're seeing that evidence too. The waves pushing against them pretty much every which way and where. G2 are really keeping them penned into the second, third or whatever of their base. Look at where the wards are. The farthest one out that Origen have is this one pink ward in the River Brush, just a little bit south of Dragon Pit. The rest is all in their jungle. So they really can't keep track of where G2 are when they're not invading their territory.
Right.
And something has got to give sooner or later. So Golden just keeps on growing right now. We're at still at about 2.6k in favor of G2. Dragon will be available in another minute, depending on which one it is. We have to take a look down there. It's still looking great for G2.
Yeah, as long as the lineup here of G2 just never let Origen set up an easy group in mid lane, they can just keep taking Dragon. It seems to be another Cloud Drake.
It's still a little unfortunate there, but hey man, you get plus 15 extra move speed out of combat, that's more than basic boots.
Let's not try and make Cloud Drake sound good, Pyra. This is one of the problems with the RNG, obviously with the Dragons, is when you have this composition that technically should be rewarded for playing such a good early game and you have full control of the map, you normally would say, you know, give them an Infernal Drake, give them a Mountain Drake, they deserve it, they played really well. You hand them the Cloud Drake, which means the snowballing is not as effective for G2, but their composition will still be more than fine, also the later we get into the game. They just won't get the extra benefit from Dragons, and that is obviously the big downside of this RNG right now. OG is very happy. It's like, oh great, another Cloud Drake, fine. Sure, we can give that one away as well. We don't really care too much. And we can try and, you know, get a second item under our belt. Maybe if they go for Dragon, we try and push in the lane. Then maybe we can get a group and try and answer poke, and that might be our only way back in the game.
Definitely have to play very, very careful for now. Trick does jump over a little bit too late, but amazing and Hybrid had already gotten away, so OG starting to push out just a little bit more on this mid lane, still hanging tough on that tier 1. They've obviously lost the same in the top and the bottom, but now Perks and Trick will be able to double time onto the Rift Herald. And I know you have some particular opinions about how this guy's been reworked.
Oh yeah, Rift Herald right now is not the strongest thing in the game. I mean, the Rift Herald itself is pretty strong. He got buffed. He hurts quite a bit. But he's not very important to kill, because we don't really see these pure split pushes very often, except for the likes of a Fizz, who gets 4 early kills, then suddenly has some value. But the main reason G2 actually takes Rift Herald here is because it's too early in the game to start setting up these crazy tower dives. It's too risky also with towers doing so much more early damage now. So for them, they're kind of just waiting it out and just making sure to take everything in the river, Dragon, Rift Herald, they just get everything, wait for Baron to spawn potentially, start setting up a Baron, then force Origin to move in, get flanked, you know, move in blind, then suddenly you win the team fight. It's just a much safer approach from G2 than starting to like dive every single tower at 17 minutes. But it is great on a Fizz, who is extremely fed and in a side lane. So there's a small win for the Rift Herald.
Yeah, it gives some opportunity still for G2 to now dedicate a little bit more time to trying to split push on the side with just the one Fizz. Perks is just such a monster right now, 4-0, that only makes him scarier. Cloud Drake gets picked up by Perks, or by Trick rather. Perks. Continue to extend just a little bit more movement speed buff. Yeah, it's not all that important, but every little thing you can grab is good while keeping Origin still penned up inside their base. You know, the line of traps, the net is just kind of closing very, very slowly, and Origin looking for any way to break out and get back into this game.
Yeah, again, we kill that second Cloud Drake to see what the third one is. Did we just see that was another Cloud Drake? Are we actually getting 3 Cloud Drakes in a row? Yes, we are.
Yes, we are.
We're actually getting 3 Cloud Drakes in a row.
So, okay, so at that point, you basically get like a regular upgraded boost extra out of combat.
I mean, you get even more when you get the third one.
Yeah.
So, I mean...
Plus 45 if you get all 3.
Okay, G2's going to be very fast.
Yeah.
They're going to be very unhappy with the Drakes. They would have wanted Infernal and Mountain for sure.
Well, if they clear it really, really fast, maybe they'll get something else.
Man, I've seen 3 Infernals in a row. I haven't seen 3 Cloud Drakes so far.
I think you're just hurting his feelings, and he's just trying to prove you wrong about how good it is. Meanwhile, G2, though, they're going to be able to, not without a little bit of extra effort, take this top tower. Perks gets a little bit of punishment. Oh, and it's kept alive by Origen very narrowly, but they are going to collect on that cash pretty soon. Now, another minute, Baron hits the Rift. Yes, it's really, really early, but with how powerful G2 are, does that not become a possibility? With Forgiven being stunned up by the Parallel Convergence, half his health is gone in the blink of an eye, just kicks.
Yeah, basically, you just set up a few pink wards around it, so you know you have the vision control near the Baron, and there's always the threat of you sneaking it. Origin always have to be like, oh, do you have a blue trinket ready? Can we spot anything? No. Do we maybe have to go in and face check at 24, 25 minutes, and that gives the opening for G2 with double TP. So far, G2 is doing everything they should do. Don't overextend. Don't go too crazy. Take your dragons, take your Rift Heralds, control the river at all costs, which they have been doing. That little pink ward down the bottom from Origin,
still sitting there.
It shouldn't be too proud because it's just there because no one cares about it. No one cares about that bush right now. So the pink ward is still there. Maybe it could be a TP location for Source in the future, but right now it's really not important. And you just see Caitlyn in mid lane putting up her traps. She's never really going to be surprised. And then it's all about what Fizz and Echo can do in the 2 side lanes.
Yeah. And how they can keep the vision on. Perks does clear out another one, courtesy of the pink ward, but you can see Origin continually investing in these pink wards, trying their damnedest just to stay relevant. CS-wise, they've actually kept up relatively well, but it's really just been a lot of back and forth, and the gold obviously tells a different story with the 4,000 gold lead plus on G2's side. They finally knocked down top tier 2 tower.
Crazy Rift Herald buff here. Value from Perks getting in, hitting that tower once. With it, it is good, obviously, for him.
Well, one by himself.
You know, some damage reduction, bit of extra damage as well.
it's so hard to see who on Origin can really deal with him right now in
No
a
one.
1v1 situation.
No one is ever going to be able to deal with him.
But how many people do they have to bring to the party? Trick has already got his back there, so it's not going to happen with Amazing. And this jungle pretty much is owned by G2, top and front.
Yep, been the same, honestly, for the last, what, 8-9 minutes?
Yep, and another tower that
game.
outer mid will finally fall. So we're hitting 21 minutes on the mark. G2 get themselves, that's only the 4th tower of the game. Doesn't seem like that many for them, but it's double what Origin have got. They continue to push this pressure game. And it is a more controlled G2 that we're seeing from what we saw previously at MSI in the finals at Rotterdam. They're not diving in gung-ho.
Yes.
They don't need to. They know they can just slowly strangle Origin to death.
It's a G2 playing the correct style right now and using the advantage the correct way. They're just unlucky, honestly. They get Cloud Drakes only, so they don't really get anything else they can really use.
Hey man, Baron's there now.
Baron is here.
Okay.
So you can see already a few pink wards has been placed on top side from G2 around this Baron here, because you will see this vision control there. Once you push out the 2 side lanes, again, you can threaten the Baron. And G2 might even try and say, okay, we put Perks on bottom side, only Source can stand in that lane because he won't just instantly get killed on the tower. And then we force a play on top side, force Source to TP, and then you just swap Kikis to the bottom side because he has another teleport, and then no one can sit there from Origin because then you have no global, and you see Source on the bottom side, you see G2 move to the Baron. So they're basically saying, guys, now we have the option, try and force a fight, use TPs from both Source and Perks. After the fight, we put Kikis bottom side, and then no one from OG can go to the bottom side because then we can just 5-man Baron and they can't stop us if one guy's left on the bottom lane.
And in the meantime, they just won 3-1 pretty much into oblivion. So yeah, the double teleport advantage definitely working wonders for them. It's so hard to see Origin coming back into the
Trick
game.
can jump the wall, there you go.
Start it off.
So now we get the start of the Baron. Again, worst case for G2, they force a teleport from Source. That's it. Best case, they get the Baron.
And it's already at half of its health. But they do peel off of it here for just a second.
Ah.
As Hybrid was going to check, so they don't want to do this in vision.
Could have committed a little bit more with Sven also coming in. He had the trap set up here. You see the entrance to the Baron. Caitlyn on red side can block these 2 entrances very easy with her traps. But they didn't actually fully commit to get TP, and that's why it became a bit of half-assed attempt, where like, okay, never mind, let's just back out, and we didn't actually get
almost
the teleport to us. Yeah, could have obviously moved in Sven if you want to fully commit to, but it's still very early in the game, Pyra. There's no reason to try and throw away this lead, but 4 pink wards near the Baron, as we talked about.
That's a lot of investment. Nobody's obviously keeping track of the next Cloud Drake, which is due to come up in about 20 seconds. So I know when he's out on the Rift, he's your favorite guy. Maybe we'll get to see more of him in this game.
Maybe.
At this point, obviously, there's the Baron to fight for instead, but there aren't any easily obtainable towers. I'm curious to see if Perks tries to go for the dive onto Soaz, because being Maokai, it's going to be so hard for him to just take him down really easily. But there we go. He hops in, he gets the poke, he hops out, keeps the wave cleared, keeps Soaz occupied.
Yeah, there's no reason for Perks to like all in and risk potentially dying or having to use too much and not even get the kill. Pick up another dragon. Maybe when you roll the dice at number 4.
Like, he doesn't even need Trick to really be here for this, does he?
I know. I mean, Trick can also just go down and solo the dragon. Easy for him.
It's not a huge investment for G2 at the moment. Perks will go ahead and swing up to grab himself a blue buff. But still, Origin trying to find holes that they can slip through to grab themselves more map vision and map control. They haven't really been able to grab much outside of their own jungle, with the exception of 1 or 2 just outside of the Baron pit. That is Cloud Drake number 3, by the way, so G2 are going to be real.
The last thing you want to see, 3 Cloud Drakes in a row under a team here. Hybrid did see a chance to get a few pink wards cleared out.
Kikis is in a 1v2 situation right now, too. This is a little bit dangerous. Backs away. So Origin have actually taken advantage of this one momentary lapse to be able to get themselves more vision, or at least clear out the vision. But G2 are still throwing this gold lead. They're still moving the snowball down the hill. 7K in the lead.
Yeah, when you get this far behind with a composition that doesn't do well once you are behind, and also against a champion like Fizz who gets so extremely fed early on, it's very, very small wins you're looking for. Like you just said, move in and clear out a few pink wards and buy you a little bit of time, force G2 to go back, buy some new wards, and then place them one more time. So you just, again, you get a little bit of time. The problem is, again, this Fizz is not going to get weaker. You just get into a point where Maokai becomes an extreme tank in the late game. Corki, of course, on 3 items is strong, but Origen will have 1 team fight to get back in this game. If they lose that team fight, G2 will just go straight down and finish the matches.
And at what point do you start questioning some of the decisions made in the pick and ban? I know you don't want to draft something that you would tend to be behind, but we talked about this Corki being something that was a fallback choice for Forgiven. Would it have done, I mean, it's sitting at 0-0-0, and he pretty much does a very, very quiet game. Would there have been anything that would have worked a little bit better for this team? Would a Sivir, for instance, have been a little bit of a better choice paired up with the Maokai?
I think you could have said draft a Sivir, draft an Israel, and then early pick an Azir as an example, and actually just completely change your composition and run.
True, he went through the pick ban.
A more standard team fighting comp, because it was Nidalee first pick, but that was just a trade for Kindred, and it's a trade a lot of teams are fine taking because they are the two best junglers, and especially Trick has always been a jungler who we're fine giving a top tier pick and just kind of be left with whatever was left.
Yeah.
But when it's a Kindred, you're very happy. So Origen didn't really gain anything from the first two rotations where they got a Corki and they got a Nidalee, traded over for Caitlyn and Kindred.
Ooh, that was a quick flash burn by Hybrid. Now G2 looking for more on the chase, but the rest of Origen are here. So nothing will come of that one. Still, we don't see the death time or the death numbers tick any further, but the pressure on the waves is still there. Perks in the top lane. Nobody's in the bot, but it's a massive wave starting to build up. And Kickus throws down a convergence, forcing Hybrid to send out the Howling Gale. G2 are just trying to set up for this Baron right now. They have all the members here to be able to do it with Perks zoning around the outside. They should be able to begin this.
Slowly, Origen are moving into the river. Fizz is behind.
Might be the fight they're looking
there
for.
We go.
Oh, there's the fish on the power of evil. Half his health is gone just like that, despite the Janus shield. And he goes golden. Hybrid knocking him back for just a second, but Perks will finish the job. Chains of Corruption lands. Amazing, looking for the execution. Not going to happen. Soraka makes a wish. Soaz a little low in this one after they peeled off the Baron. All said and done, it is a 1-0 for G2.
So once again, G2 are baiting around the Baron. Origen moving in will actually get a mid tower as well. So the fact that Origen finally got to group, didn't get punished with teleports, but you can see the minion waves on the sides are pushing very far in and very close to Origen's base. G2 is getting a little bit too greedy here on starting these Barons.
Yeah, Sven's low, Mithy is incredibly low. Soaz sees his time to be able to run in on that one, but he gets hit by the 90 caliber. He's got to back out. G2 now. Don't make those mistakes after such a beautiful early game.
Right, G2 did so many things correct the first 24 minutes, 25 minutes of the game. And then, when they actually had the chance to set up the same play, put Perks bot lane against the Maokai, start the Baron, force teleports, then swap it around with Kickus, they just opted straight into a fight where Origen are allowed to be 5 together. This is the only way Origen can come back in the game, is if they get to team fight as 5 and never get split up on the map. And that's what G2 just actually allowed to happen.
Really
1 for 1, very close fight, Perks almost going down, mid tower dying, because the rest of G2 is around the Baron. Small victories, again, always keep in mind, Origen wants small victories. 1 kill here, 1 tower there, and G2 once again back on Baron.
Eyes on the prize.
No TPs at all available, but they're getting it very low before Origen has even reacted. Look at this, Amazing is very far away.
Yeah, there's no way they're going to be able to react to this one, so G2 pick up the Baron at a low price. 29 minutes on the clock, and they get themselves a few minutes to work with that Baron buff. Let's see what they can make of it.
Slightly longer than normal, the good old Baron buff, to make sure he's not completely useless compared to a big Elder Drake.
Speaking of Drakes, next one will be up in another minute, and well, it's no longer a Cloud Drake, but it's the Ocean.
Which
is not as useful either.
Yeah, late game especially not that useful, getting the 4%, where a lot of the times you will be in fights, obviously with champions or towers, so it won't give you that much sustain. Definitely not been a game where G2 has been lucky with dragons, that's for sure, but Origen have been very lucky with the amount of, or with the choices for G2. Still, Baron has been picked up, G2 are still ahead, they still have this exact same setup.
They keep on growing that lead. I mean, they've not needed luck this game. They just are playing that much better, but they're still making, we're starting to see them make a couple of mistakes that Origen have, for their part, unfortunately not been able to punish too much. Losing the 1 member in the straight up 5v5. Now with the Baron push on, G2, we're going to go right back to the 1-3-1 strat.
And it's harsh to say it was mistakes. I think G2 were just getting a little bit tired of playing only that little play around the side and said, you guys, we are so far ahead, we can just take a team fight. Obviously it was a close one. Got the Baron right after because Origen couldn't go in and check another time, had no TP either from Soaz. And therefore G2 gets what they want. Straight onto the tower, you get that little proc as well from the Rift Hell buff for Kirk. A lot of damage.
He should be able to secure this tower up, and he does get it. Playful Trickster, they know they can't catch him, so that one is free. Meanwhile, while they were moving around the map, G2 were able to grab an inner and now Perks onto Soaz solo. So the base is starting to crumble away from Origen. Their chances in this game one crumbling away. Kikis will chrono break back to safety after being caught by the Chains of Corruption. Perks is still on the inhibitor, splitting it, but he's got a lot of people coming towards him. Cavalry's arrived, and he should be able to continue this push quite so easily.
And there's no way for Origen to really engage onto him. He just tricks to the Maokai dash here like you just saw on top of the screen. And then you can't really lock him down. Another tower.
Inhibitor turret.
Sven very low from some poke. Maybe Power People can engage you. No, it's actually on cooldown. He's ulti.
Just used a few moments ago. Trick a little bit low though. He does use the blighted.
I was just fake hyping it up.
Yeah,
but
well,
that's no ulti.
I mean, this
Joke's
base,
on you.
the base is crumbling here, but this is really what started off several minutes ago now. Soaz a little bit low in this one. Ace in the hole. Amazing will block it off the front. Inhibitor's not gone down. G2 are a little bit low here, so they should have to back away really close. And another wish from Mithy just to keep them alive throughout all of it. 31.5 minutes, but G2 are looking to close this game out on their next push.
So one inhib down. Another dragon for G2.
Hey, the regen is useful here. That will be number 4.
Ocean Drake, meaning there will be no more Drakes other than the Elder Drake. But G2 won't need it to finish out the game. Base is open. Focus on that mid inhib now. Bottom lane after. Obviously, Origen can keep sitting there and just try and fire over the wall and defend as much as possible. But it's been a game, it was decided almost at the 5 to 10 minute mark because we have that fight in the bottom lane that cost the flash from Power Weevil. He gets dove right after by the Fizz and the Kindred, and then suddenly Perks was extremely far ahead, and Origen and the composition just fell apart.
Yeah. And G2 have just run away with it from there. Over 10,000 gold ahead. 6 figures in the bank. G2 Esports, 5 figures, sorry. I can't do math, ever. Origen really need to just think about how they're going to adapt for the next game, how they're going to change the pick and ban strategy, how they're going to change the early game. They are the ones who opted into that lane swap scenario.
Which
and
was fine.
It looked good and even for a while, yes. But then they got a little too high feet trying to get picks, and it gave G2 the opening to start building that lead.
And that's the thing, you have some time now. Obviously discuss, what can we change in here while you are sitting there defending. You're waiting for G2 to maybe overextend. I like that last little inhib turret.
Yeah. They're running out of room.
You're definitely, you have been for the last 30 minutes, basically.
I mean, you're getting backed up very, very slowly over the cliff. That is your own fountain. And G2 just keep on nudging inch by inch by inch. An open inhibitor in the mid that Perks is worrying at. No inhibitor in the top. A tower under siege now. Trick is caught for just a second. He does get the Lamb's Respite down. First time he's really had to use that all game. So they do get pushed back for the moment. Origen still showing that they can fight, but unfortunately Perks isn't too worried about that as he just takes a trident to the inhibitor for free.
Did see some of the damage Origen can do. Great burst if they also manage to lock down one of the targets, but Soraka is there to heal it, Kindred ult is there to save you.
Come right back in.
Ooh, Trick now, no.
Oh, amazing. Ooh, he got caught, chunked out very low here. Perks is threatening on the outside after he finished off the inhibitor. Tower has gone down. Origen are down to Nexus turrets, and it may only be one as Perks finishes off that one. One Nexus turret, one inhibitor is all that's left of their base at this point. OG trying to hang on by a thread, but you've got to think they're thinking about the game number 2.
And we just see G2 trying to get out of combat so they can benefit from this movement speed and get the fantastic cape behind them. The wind. Because that's what you do with the Cloud Break, you just get out of combat. But no, it's actually trying to win the game, guys.
And here we go. Kick is teleporting in on this one. Last inhibitor will fall. The rest of OG are starting to melt away. Kikis going on into hybrid, dashing forward. So as a tanky as the tree is, it is not enough. A double kill for the top laner of G2 Esports. It is only going to be Nexus turret and only going to be Nexus just shy of 35 minutes into the game. And the reigning champs prove they are still supreme.
And by no means the game Origen were looking for. Coming in, wanted to show, obviously, that Sven and Mithy made the wrong decision by going to G2. However, the game literally falls apart at 10 minutes because this Fizz gets locked in as a last pick against the Virus. We talked about it multiple times, gets the early kills. Origen had a poor engage in mid lane as well. And as we said, this kind of composition, it can't fall behind, especially not against things that can split push, because you never get to team fight 5-on-5 unless the other team literally tells you, come, stop this Baron and we will flank you and kill you. So the draft from Origen basically had no answers once they fell behind, and that made it look much weaker than it actually was.
That's very true, but you have to think going up against these opponents, especially after what happened in game number 1, they should be looking for something a little safer, something with a fallback, not because they plan to fall behind, but because they can't afford to fall behind and not have a comeback mechanism. Really, really rough game to start things off for OG. I mean, everything's taken away from them. They lost the spring split, they lost their bot lane, and they lost game 1.
Honestly, a hard game to hype as well, because
it was difficult.
It was just so slow, and you kind of knew, okay, there's really.
But it was it was smart from G2.
It was.
It was a little bit different that we've seen from G2 of old, where they would make a lot more YOLO mistakes and dive in. And
this is Mythi's shot calling, by the way.
It was fantastic. It was beautiful to watch.
Control.
No, I'm happy to see them evolving along with their new players. We're gonna have to see what the analyst desk says about it as we send it over there to break that game 1 down.
Thank you very much, guys. And obviously, we talked a lot about the meta and the picks for each team's coming into it. So I just want to follow up on that and obviously take a look at the picks and bans. Vedius, you talked a lot about possible champion pool and meta adaptability for Power of Evil. However, they drafted a comp to which G2 reacted perfectly.
Yeah, we saw a pick composition come out from OG, which we have seen work in other regions. LCK have made it work really well. And the Varus with the Nidalee is something that can synergize if you set it up properly, and that's something that OG did struggle moving forward. But I really like the Soraka pick into this the poke comp as well, because they saw the Nidalee, they saw the Corki, and they said, okay, we can see what OG are trying to do. Let's get a bit of sustain to deal with this pressure.
Yeah, we're seeing 2 compositions here that neither really counters each other, but it all depends on who gets ahead. If you get control of the game as one of these poke comps with a beefy front line, then you can obviously whack away at those towers. What ended up happening was Origen falling behind early, and then the 1-3-1 split prevents them from grouping up, as the Fisher talked about plenty on the desk. Also, it makes it impossible to even get into those fights because everybody's kind of locked in their individual lanes. So if you have a composition that requires grouping and sieging of towers, and you're never allowed to even group in the first place, then things get really rough. So Origen, they kind of need to look at the early game again and see where it went wrong.
Yeah, and we can take a look at where it went wrong or started to go wrong. Our first replay is of Perks, who chose to go with Fizz. They tried to ban out all the assassins, but he's like, hey, I'm going to play the fish. And then this skirmish happened.
Yeah, so you can see that Trick ends up getting caught out of position, but look how many resources actually get invested just to get the kill. Power of Evil burning both his flash and his exhaust just to get the kill down onto Trick. And remember that the strong side of the map is the bottom half for G2. Their bottom lane can quickly rotate up, as well as having the mid laner there to get the collapse. Fizz getting that first kill was absolutely massive for G2.
Yeah, it definitely was a little ill-advised pick-off, but you could have made a case for just getting the kill and then getting the hell out of dodge. The problem for me is that they kept fighting afterwards. I can see why they could go for the pick despite being on the wrong side of the map, but it's then they got locked into what they call like the soul queue mentality. I guess we'll just keep fighting with no thought, and then obviously everybody's collapsing here, so we see lack of communication on the side of Origen here. So yeah, they're reacting instinctively, but the communication isn't there. If you look at G2, I think there's a lot of communication there, but we see some internal struggle fighting the let's kill everybody style that Perks is used to playing, and then the more controlled shot calling from Mithy. So they'll need to find a balance internally there as well.
They certainly do. And it's funny that you mentioned communication issues, because moving forward, they did definitely have a couple communication issues where they actually looked for another fight towards the mid game, and that was not really what they wanted to do with their poke composition. If you're trying to force a fight against a Fizz who's already 2-0 up, it's not going to work out in your favor.
Yeah, they kind of overextend here. They land some poke, but obviously this is the weakness of some of these comps. It's flanks. If you have your flanks exposed, you're not warding them properly, then obviously these 1-3-1 comps can just tear you apart from the sides. If Origen at that point is in the lead or has a bigger command of the game, they have more wards, they can take it slower. They don't need to rush into these decisions because there's no pressure from G2 kind of locking them down. That is kind of the difference.
On the other side, not rushing into decisions, we saw that G2 did take a little bit of a time to close things out in this one. What did you make of that? Just taking it calm, cool, collected, or did you see improvement or things that they should improve on?
Well, I mean, they were constantly applying pressure onto OG, and OG, they still had a fair amount of wave clear, so it wasn't super easy for G2 to just walk up and take the towers for free, but they were constantly extending the vision line, and their main play was to pick up that the Baron. You saw them have full control over the Drake. They didn't give a single one away. Unfortunately, all three were the Cloud Drake for them, so they could run really fast, but it wasn't that valuable, but so much control of the Baron helped them move forward.
Yeah, off the back of the early game, G2 was bleeding them dry. I think we can criticize their execution on Baron, More pink wards were needed from multiple members. Synergy between pushing all the lanes up and then sweeping all the wards was necessary, because there was always that like strangling ward that was put in the river, slowed everything down. Execution was lacking, but the concept, the idea was right. I think G2, if they look at this replay, they can easily identify where they need to improve in execution. But the concept was right. Obviously, it is very easy when your Fizz is like 4-0 at 11 minutes.
Yeah, definitely. And that also made us give our first player of the game here in the arena 2 perks on Fizz. Not a big surprise in that game. I mean, the whole team definitely stepped up, but it's one of those marquee performances where you pick that champion, you know you have to perform on it, and he snowballs the game.
I really like the Fizz pick as well. You saw how many assassin bans were thrown at him during Champion Select. The Zed, the LeBlanc saying, no, we're not going to give you a comfort pick. Then he brings out the Fizz as well. Really complements his playstyle of, I want to go for kills, I want to be that carry, and it's nice to see that Perks can still have that phenomenal performance from the mid lane.
Yes, and in game 2, we will also see the Perks versus Power of Evil matchup. No changes in there for OG, and obviously the best of 2. We'll see how the teams adjust to that, because it's also the first time, so OG could just turn up and show us a completely different comp. We'll see that in just a bit. However, before we take a break here, we're going to check in on the series that's underway over in the LCS studio and on the other stream between H2K and Roccat. Crepo, you've been keeping an eye on that surprising result.
Yeah. The analyst desk right now is a central hub, so spoilers, be aware. Jankos went in here for an early engage in the early game, but he kind of got turned around by Arak. So this put Roccat ahead. Right now you're thinking Rocket's going to take it. The advantage got thrown. The next key moment in the game was actually a fight that broke out in the mid here, where H2K is pulling ahead. They kind of sieged down 2 turrets and they were leading. Earlier than this, Roccat actually snuck a Baron to get the game even again. So the game swung a couple of times. That is the main key thing you have to take away from this game. H2K looked in a very commanding position. Beautiful team fight here as well, where they kind of back off all together. So they seem very much so in unison, while Roccat was kind of chaos. But out of that chaos eventually came one pick about the minute before this phase right here. That led to a double siege from Roccat. Then they got the ace and they closed out the game. Very confusing. Basically, the game swung back and forth quite a few times. Neither team played perfect. It did look like H2K was the better team. They took control of the map, but they left their guard exposed a couple times, and Roccat has zero hesitation kind of going in for the kill.
That was super impressive to me, to be honest, with their changes in their roster. Of course, the Korean players in there and what they pull off in the end is a difficult team composition, but they thrived in the team fights in the end, which is something to commend.
Raze actually has a bit of a reputation of being that just go support. He loves to force the engagements, and being put on that thresh, I think it really set him up for success. Constantly looking for those picks and making plays really fits his playstyle.
Yeah, a lot of the early aggression kind of stemmed from Betsy as well, doing some really strong trading on that Swain pick. Eventually moved in side lanes, had a lot of attention towards him. Where Roccat failed is when they couldn't capitalize on kind of the cross-map plays. So H2K went to kill Betsy. Roccat didn't get anything done. Eventually, they managed to put Betsy to great use in these fights, and he really carried the momentum.
Yeah, Betsy also player of the game in that first H2K vs Roccat game. If you want to catch the second game over there, that's just gotten underway over on EULCS2. But here on the LCS Arena, G2 have started the series with a win, but Origen has a chance to fire back in just a few minutes. Stay tuned. Game 2 is coming your way in 3.5.